And then education, which is the last of the three issues. Christopher Brumfitt, and I identified this a little earlier on, in a paper called What is Language Education is Education Language, makes the comment that language and education suffer from the same disadvantages, that they are both too familiar. We all speak a language, and we have very strong positions about that, he says. We all have been to school, well, most of us anyway. And we also have strong positions about that. And the two things seem to come into conflict rather than to work in harmony, largely because we operate on the basis of our personal ideas rather than on the clear, objectified positions of the linguist and of linguistic analyses. It is kind of ironic that these two disciplines, which share a common set of problems, in fact, have to be virtually at war one with the other, or they're often at war one with the other, simply because experience, according to him, challenges expertise, and this creates some difficulty for us. I feel that the time has come in that particular area for us to maybe borrow the Wordsworthian line and suspend our disbelief or our beliefs so that we could, in fact, recognize the reality that has been established through language and linguistic analysis. Many years ago at a conference when I was in my salad days, to borrow a line from Antony and Cleopatra, at the very first conference that I attended of this kind, back in 1972, Beryl Loftman Bailey, the late Beryl Loftman Bailey, stood up at the conference and said to the conference, that it is fine for linguists to indulge themselves in debating all those fancy issues that we like to talk about. But the teacher in the classroom cannot afford that luxury. The classroom teacher requires clarity. In other words, we can enjoy ourselves with all those little arguments and debates, but when a teacher gets into the classroom, the guidance has got to be clear. And it is therefore incumbent on us as linguists to know when we're talking to ourselves and to know when we're talking to people who have to implement the things we're talking about. And I have to confess that I've been in the company of linguists and that we like to talk to ourselves. And that very often we don't really talk to the persons who've got to implement what we want them to do. There are a few very noble exceptions here, and I heard some of them mentioned this morning. I think, and this is where I fall sort of behind the generation, I think people like Carrington and the late Professor Dennis Craig, both of whom I consider mentors of mine, I think that these two people certainly made significant attempts to form those links with the people who have got to interpret the many things that we say and do. And as linguists, I think we've got to get past the time when we speak to ourselves. Okay. I was going to, well, I will just draw to your attention very quickly that the concerns of the first conference, which I mentioned earlier on, were to identify a proper definition of the context of learning in the Caribbean, identify critical education issues, and to acknowledge the role of language in Caribbean education, the roles. Subsequently, we had from Professor Craig, whom I just mentioned, in the 1970s a summary of the work that had been done in education, English language education up to that point in time, or mainly English language education. Our current concerns need to address the understanding of the complex social-linguistic context in which we operate, and in particular, to address issues such as determining the languages of education. And a significant amount of work has been done in this area by people like Hazel Simmons MacDonald in the back there, and Hubert, and, well, I don't want to name people around because what then begins to happen is you forget. But I just want to identify some of these people as persons who have made these contributions and indicate that these are one of the areas, these are areas in which linguistics has made a very stirring contribution. Determining the roles of languages in education. I don't think much attention has been paid to that, but I think one of the concerns that I have certainly is the fact that where a language is available in a society and may not to be part of the normal processes of education for whatever demographic or social issues, that those languages really ought to be given enough focus within the education system so that nobody in that system would be unaware of their existence and unaware of their significance in the total society. It's easy in Guyana to talk about, for instance, English. The old Chief Education Officer's report used to say, for most of the population, English is the first language, except for in the deep interior, where the Amerindians speak their own languages and dialects. That was the sum total of the annual report for about 30 years. Every year, it's the same paragraph that used to come up, as far as I could trace it. And it's so helplessly inaccurate in terms of what it said then and what it could mean now. We need to also ensure, as linguists, ensure that the societies develop the capacity to deliver the things that we would like them to deliver. That is, we really need to ensure that we determine what kinds of institutional strengths we need to establish and how we need to monitor and support and develop and extend those particular institutions that we ask to be established. And for me, critically, maintaining the dynamic. I really think that we can't lose sight of the fact that language is dynamic, and that in any society, the relationships are going to be in a state of constant movement. And we need to keep our tabs on that so that we don't find ourselves behindhand. In that sense, I think official institutions, ministries of education, institutes, and so on, really need to focus on the kinds of support which they will allow over time. The tendency is to think that there's a fix. You do it today, and that's the end of it. Well, the only thing that operates like that is an old-time sardine tin with the key on the outside. Once you open the key and you throw the contents out, that's it. It doesn't work like that in the language situation. It's always going to be in flux. It's always going to change. All right, I'm going to just encourage us to, well, I'd even go past that slide, and to talk about the central questions, which to me, in this particular dispensation, seem to be, what does being educated mean? Who is to be educated? How is the process to proceed? What should be the language is of education and evaluation? These are issues which concern us and issues that I think we need to look at. We need to look at our stakeholder roles and responsibilities. And as I come to the end, I can't help thinking about a comment I heard, I think, from Martha Dykoff earlier on today, which forced me to reflect what I call in my end is my beginning, because I came into this business hoping that I could have made a big difference 40 years ago, 35 years ago, and I'm leaving it, well, in one sense, still waiting to see this happen. But I take comfort in the lines from T.S. Eliot, if you will permit me to misuse them. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring shall be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Thank you very much.